Hi, Joey.
Hey, Mike. Yeah, hey, Mike.
How are you, man?
I am A-okay. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thanks.
Good. I have a question before we jump into West Side Story, which I'm obsessed
Sure.
with. Um, I recently moved to Columbus,
You're kidding. You're
and
here?
oh, you're in Columbus right now?
I'm in Columbus right now. That's hilarious.
Yeah. I wanted to know because basically my husband wanted to ask. He wanted me to clarify if it is Gahana or Gehanna because I've been corrected by many people, and I don't
Oh,
know what the true answer is.
what have people said to you? Have they said both?
They've said both, and both people have corrected me.
I've always heard it Gehanna, like pretty,
Gehanna?
like like pretty,
Okay.
Midwestern, like Gehanna. You know what I mean?
Diana, that makes sense. Okay.
Gahana sounds very upper class. Maybe
Kahana.
they, maybe I'm not from the upper class part of Gahana.
I like Gehanna better anyway. Yeah, I used to work for Kappa. I used to work in their ticket office. And it was the
Yeah.
first job that I worked there. And when I would confirm like people's addresses and stuff, they would always write on me as if they were expecting it, the mispronunciation. So
Sure.
yeah. Okay. Um, I'm a little obsessed with this movie. I've seen it 3 times.
Oh wow.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I played Riff in a community theater production of West Side Story. Um,
Excellent.
it's um, it's like one of the best musicals ever, obviously. And then I didn't know what to expect from this, and then I was like, it's surpassed my expectations. Of course, why wouldn't it? It's Steven Spielberg and Tony Kushner, and like, my God. And I think what you and a lot of the actors get to do, which I'm going to ask you about in a second, is the text is so rich. It
Yeah.
feels like a completely different thing. Um, I guess, sort of in a general sense, the first thing I should ask you is with a show like West Side Story that has a very famous Best Picture iteration already in place, and it's such a musical theater staple. What does sort of so cheesy, but what sort of does West Side Story mean to you?
Well, I think probably similar to you. It sounds like, at least for me as a youngster, and being introduced to that film,
Mhm.
it was a very important part of my upbringing and overall of me deciding to, I think, pursue this as an
Mhm.
actual, career. Um, and so the original film itself planted a lot of seedlings, for
Right.
me, and kind of paved the way for me to just pursue this in general.
Yeah.
Um, so, it was honestly, it never came across my mind of me ever wanting to do this show specifically,
Mhm.
but the movie and the show itself has always been, I think, one of those things that have set, you know, the path in motion for me to just do this across the board.
I feel like this is sort of like a musical theater milestone that you have to sort of hit. Like if you're like sort
Yeah,
of
kind of,
studying
right?
theater. Yeah. It's like a landmark.
Yeah,
It's like, you haven't seen West Side Story? What are you talking?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Or you didn't play Baby John in a community theater production of West Side Story? What's wrong with you? You're
Well,
what type of theater person are you? You know what I mean? Yeah.
yeah. Um, I wanted to ask you because I had the fortune of talking to David as well, and I wanted to ask what you think Riff can maybe learn from Bernardo as a leader.
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Mm. Not that you guys have a ton of time interacting with one another, obviously, but
No, we don't. We
yeah.
don't. I think the biggest thing that Riff probably could learn from Bernardo was um, Riff's whole reason for doing the thing that he does
Mhm.
is to keep that Jet family intact, to try to hold on to something that is dispersing in front of his eyes.
Mhm.
And similarly, I think that is something that Bernardo is also trying to do. It's this kind of like preservation of
Mhm.
what you have. That's kind of like what they both are fighting for.
Yeah.
Um, I think it extends a little bit farther probably for Bernardo in terms of self-defense with these hoodlums running around, you know. But, you know, I think at the core of it, it is like the reason for their taking up arms is for their own self-preservation. And, you know, along with that self-preservation, the underlying current that's there is love. Even though it is fear-based love, you know, which then I think creates the action and reaction that these two have. But obviously, I think the biggest thing, if Riff had the emotional intelligence or the ability to recognize and see that they're actually the same, you know, that'd be well, it'd be a totally different story.
Yeah, it's sort of just like every time that I've seen it, I was like, if they just sat down for like 25 minutes,
totally, just like had a beer and like talked about this, you know, probably would be okay.
Yeah, they could take on the world together, but no.
Totally.
I sort of wanted to know, in terms of choreography, I love how, you know, this movie has a completely different feel and look to the movement. I want to talk about Cool sort of separately, but specifically in like the opening sequence with the prologue, how did you sort of want to embody a physicality that is sort of, you know, violent and messy and scrappy into that? Because I sort of love how certain movements, especially in the prologue, can sort of be thought of as dance, and some of it just as like sort of like fight choreography almost. How did you want to deal with that with the beginning of the movie?
Well, I didn't really get a say in any of that. Right. These are, you know, choices that I really get to make on the day of filming. We had 4 months of rehearsal with our esteemed, wonderful choreographer, Justin Peck, and his team, Patricia Delgado and Craig Salstein. Really that 4 months was time for them and Justin really to explore what that language was. You know, there's a great book that I can't think of the name of off the top of my head at this moment. I was reading during it, but I remember specifically they talked about, you know, youth gangs at the time, and a big like calling card for these gangs as they were walking down the street was some sort of like walk specific thing. And you know, obviously for West Side, we think of, you know, snaps, or, you know what I mean? Something like that. And there's, you know, yes, exactly. And I think, you know, it's so, there's something about watching these group of guys walk down the middle of the street in New York, and they're just like owning the neighborhood. And so much so that they're like dancing and playing, you know, while at the same time you really understand that they're a genuine threat, kind of the community that's around them. So it really is, I think, huge kudos to Justin Peck for honoring the choreography that did exist with Jerome Robbins, but also bringing in a different tone, or maybe same tone, but elaborating on it a little bit more. So, I mean, that was huge kudos to him, quite frankly, for wanting to do that. And in terms of like me specifically walking around as Riff, physicality wise, my body was just kind of broken by the time we started shooting. And so
4 months of rehearsal, that is so much time.
And so, you know, like I watched the movie, you know, you're watching this 27-year-old who's like broken, man, and it looks like it's broken. I'm like, yeah, it really works, you know? Really works for this kid.
Well, I guess that kind of leads into my next thing. I sort of never thought until I saw you do this part, there's sort of like there's like such a dangerous quality to you in this part. I felt like you made me feel so uneasy in a way that I just don't know what Riff is going to do. I don't know what he's going to say. I don't know if he's just going to run up on somebody and do something. And I sort of, you know, wanted to ask what it's sort of like to play a character like that, because it feels like he literally has nothing to lose, or to a certain extent that he's almost like dead already.
Yeah, there's definitely nihilism that goes along with Riff, and that was a conversation that Tony and Steven and I had. I had come across this photo series album that was made by this photographer, Bruce Davidson, called Brooklyn Gangs. And as I was going through that, essentially I found who I felt was a true representation of who Riff was, a real life Brooklyn gang member of the time.
Oh, wow.
And when I think as you go through that photo album, you can't help but feel that nihilistic quality that the children have. They genuinely don't have anything. And they certainly don't have anything to look forward to. The system is not set up to help in any sort of really meaningful way.
Right.
For all intents and purposes, they have abandoned them. And, you know, we see this. This just is a cyclical thing in this country and other countries too, where, you know, poor people in neighborhoods have a harder time seeing themselves outside of their environment because they're not represented. The systems aren't in place to actually make a meaningful impact to get them to progress out of where they are. And so because of these cumulative things, there really isn't much, these, especially as children, where you're not thinking about tomorrow anyway, really. Right. That's where it begins. That's where your world like starts, ends, you know, and finishes. Right. Oh. It's all like right here. What is today? And you know, it was just something that I think I just innately kind of understood. And you know, you have no real family except for this tribe of boys who are holding each other up very precariously, you know, or as best as they can. And when that's the only thing that you have to hold on to, and you see your home being demolished all around you, and you are feeling the tensions within the gang start to tear apart, you kind of go big or you go home, you know. And I think that's where Riff is. You know, we start the movie with the idea of maybe the Jets are going to disperse at the beginning of the film. And I think Riff is really backed into a corner here of trying to get Tony back into the Jets in an attempt to try to rekindle the family. And that's really it. You know, I think this guy has no other options in front of him, at least that he can see, in terms of trying to keep this family together.
Allows him to just sort of live with big swings. Every single choice he makes lives with big swings.
Absolutely.
So speaking of Tony, I think the thing that I took away most from this version is sort of like that broken family after he's gone, and the sort of after Tony is gone, then he comes back. And I felt like that that excitedness that Riff sort of conveys about him being around, even though he's trying to convince him, you know, to get more into the fold, there's sort of an earnestness about it, and he's sort of using every single thing that he can in order to get Tony back. I was very drawn to that. And I think one of my favorite parts of the whole movie is Cool, because I feel like that is one of the only times that we see Riff completely lose control because Tony is taking it away from him. I guess what kind of conversations did you have with Ansel about that, and sort of having that sort of control taken away from him? Because I loved seeing that.
Sure. Well, it was a much larger conversation in terms of the creatives wanted to stick to the original Broadway 1957 order of the songs, not the 61 film order of the songs, but the 57 stage production of the order of songs.
Okay.
So where Cool lands in this production is before the Rumble as opposed to after the Rumble. And then the other part about that is Tony Kushner laying in this pretty meaty tension between Tony and Riff throughout the entire story, and where they land into telling this number, telling this story through the number Cool. And then Justin basically kind of picking up those pieces, and the three of us, Ansel, myself, and Justin, I think really plotting out the beginning, middle, and end of that number. And basically in that singular number, we tell the entire story from start to finish of Riff and Tony. We see kind of how they used to be, we see where they are, and then we see where they end, and the betrayal of that and the hurt amongst them. And it is this thing that before Riff came into power amongst the Jets, Tony was the leader of the Jets, and he got arrested and sent away, and now Riff is in this position. And obviously Riff is not the person that should be in this position. He's the crazy guy that you want on your right, and Tony's the more power I think persona amongst the tribe, and Riff knows that. And the whole attempt of trying to just get him back, I always say it's like coming home for Thanksgiving, because here's this guy Tony who genuinely wants to be a different person. He's trying to actively change, he's trying to become a better human, and Riff's inability to, I think, either recognize it or love Tony enough to let him go in that way, and not in that like kind of selfish way he's holding on to him. That's of course like where all that tension is. And I think we experience that with everyone that we love very dearly. From time to time. Depending on the season. The sort of like crazy right-hand man rising to power, that's going to give me like a whole other perspective of it when I watch it again. So it's sort of like okay. Something I wanted to ask was going into the Rumble, how much do you think Riff is actually worried of like losing the Rumble? Because I was sort of wondering if he knew, because Bernard was obviously a boxer, a fighter. I don't know if there was part of Riff that is actually worried and he's trying not to show it, or does he actually just think, oh, I got this, they're going down really fast? It's a really like mixed bag of a lot of complicated things that are going on. I think initially going into the Rumble, he genuinely thinks that if we get Tony to participate in this thing, they're fine. They're fine. The family's going to be back together. Things will go back to the way they were. And the fact that Cool ends the way that it does, and Riff is going in there alone, there's a certain amount of real, genuine fear that I think we see building up in the quintet. There's this one moment, when Riff leans over to Ice and confirms with him, womb to tomb, sperm to worm. Like, okay, you got my back? Yes, I got your back. Okay. So there's these moments of trying to tamper down the fear. while at the same time there's just this utter betrayal and I don't want to say lack of hope, but there is a certain amount of nihilism going into it as well. So it is a mixed bag of, there's something innately, I think, understanding in Riff going into it that it's not that it's not going to go the way he wants it per se, but he knows that he's lost all control of the situation. And you know, it's hard to explain. It's not that he's given up, but maybe he just doesn't care. Maybe he doesn't care as much. If Tony were there with him, maybe he would have cared more. If that makes sense.
It does. It's sort of no, it's just that Tony, I feel like, comforts Riff in a way that it's sort of like anytime that I see it, I keep thinking to myself, like, don't go into an actual physical fight angry, because you will lose. And that's what I kept thinking. I was like, Riff is gonna lose. Well, they all lose, but it's sort of like the state in which he goes into it, it sort of feels like no one's gonna win either way.
No, it is like it's hard to explain that whole thing, but it's easier to feel it.
Well, it's also like, and that final section with you and Ansel, oh my god, I sort of like that sort of brief heartbreaking thing. I won't say conversation because you've been stabbed, but it's also just like, it just rips your heart out, and you sort of see the history of their relationship sort of in that almost wordless exchange that they had before you fall over. And then the whole rumble just sort of ends like just little boys, just scattered, scared, terrified little boys running for their lives. Okay. I guess one last quick question before I let you go. You know, Dear Evan Hansen, original Broadway cast, now as a movie, the same year that West Side Story comes out, the year of the musical that everyone keeps saying, which I love, more movie musicals, please. I would just say, if you sort of had your own choice in a new adaptation of any Broadway musical turned into a movie, what would you want to do?
Oh man, it's hard.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's really hard. You know, I kind of think it might be interesting cinematically. It's not a flashy show, but I think it could be interesting cinematically. Sunday. I kind of think Sunday in the Park with George would be very interesting in a film adaptation, and like a kind of, you know, small, but then like using the paintings to explore the cinematic elements of it all and getting inside like this artist's head and the complications of their relationship. It could be really interesting.
I mean, you can do anything now especially with the way that they can merge animation and real life. Oh god, now I want that. I never even thought of that. Now I need it.
It'd be fun.
Really fun. Well, thank you so much, Mike. I'm just head over heels for this movie. I'm going to try to see it again, like as many times as I can, because I just think this is so cheesy to say, but it feels like when I watched it, I was like, this is like what you go to the movies for. But it just felt huge. And I love the way that Steven moves the camera, and the energy that just like drips off the screen in this movie is breathtaking. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you so much for
that. Stay safe. Have a good rest of your day.
You as well. Thanks again.
All right, bye.